Hi there. Today I thought to have a look at something I'm calling a time-delayed stop loss. Um, it's based on the idea of the same type of thing you'll see with a fill or kill, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. I.e., you place a bet into the market, and if that bet's not matched, Fairbot will cancel it after a set amount of time. Well, what I'm looking at here is doing something similar, but with a bet that's already been matched. In other words, you have a liability in the market and you don't want that liability to exist for too long. So if after a period of time that liability hasn't been traded out, this technique will force it to be traded out. So at the moment I'm looking at the Wolverhampton races. This is potentially not the ideal races to look at it, but whilst I'm developing it, it will suffice. So let me just run through the rules that I've got up here. The first one, simple one, just switches to this market as I move through all these races today. And the next one is actually placing a lather field at odds of 2. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, lather fields on the all-weather tracks isn't necessarily a good thing to do. But the reason I'm doing a lather field is so that I can just walk away from Fairbot and let it get on with it, placing hopefully multiple bets into the market. And of course, laying at 2 means that if the first lay is taken and that horse goes on to win without another one being matched, you'll lose your stake of, I'm using £100 in these examples. If two are matched, you'll end up with a scratch trade, and of course if 3 is matched, you'll end up with a profit. Now in this situation here, when the first one that gets matched, as soon as you've got that liability into the market, this rule here is then triggered. So essentially it's monitoring the market and seeing if the minimum P&L is less than 95. I've used 95 simply because I'm in simulation mode, so it's just in case Fairbot has a funny and it doesn't have a liability of exactly £100. It may be wise to actually reduce that figure still further, especially if Fairbot thinks that bet has been matched at odds lower than 2. But that can be adjusted easily enough. So in essence, this execute dummy is just a dummy rule which doesn't actually do anything except fire twice. So as soon as the bet is matched, this will fire once based on this condition here. And then after 10 seconds, if that condition still exists, in other words, the liability hasn't been cleared, it will execute again, which triggers this rule to fire. So this is a green up all option, and it uses the, let me just move this out of the way so you can actually see the whole definition. So this one here is based on that rule having been executed twice. In other words, that time lapse, in this case of 10 seconds, has gone through, and this dummy rule has fired twice, which triggers that to automatically green up. Now, in the meantime, in that 10-second window, if a second horse comes along and is matched, this condition here will no longer be true, so this rule cannot fire a second time, and consequently, the green up here won't fire a second time. So that's the purpose of these. So these are the 2 main ones that are actually doing the forced trade out after a certain period of time. And obviously you can use that technique in any type of situation where you have a liability, specifically a known liability, because you need to specify this thing here. One of the reasons for choosing an LTF as well is that, as I've mentioned numerous times, all weather isn't great for lather fields, in my opinion. However, I'm looking at potentially incorporating it into the staggered lather field with variable green up. So I may actually look at this technique using that mechanism. But that's another video for another day. So essentially, if I pull up the watch list, you'll see that if I switch to this race here, which ran earlier on this evening, you'll see that the dummy rule fired twice. In other words, a second horse didn't come in and get matched at odds of 2, and consequently this one fired twice, which caused that to fire, so it greened up or readied up for a £78 loss as opposed to a £100 loss that it would have been. Going to the next one, this one was a funny, which is why I was saying that you might want to actually reduce that. There was only one horse that was matched, and it must have. I wasn't watching the race because I was away off elsewhere in the house. So this probably got matched very, very late on, and that's why Fairbot's taken that smaller price. So consequently, the liability on that, based on a £100 stake, was only 64, which meant that this thing here was never matched, it was never true, so consequently this rule didn't fire. So it didn't actually process the green up rule here. And then in this one that's just gone, you'll see that there was actually 2 runners, 2 horses were matched. In other words, the second horse came in and was matched before the 10-second window expired. So this rule never fired, and consequently this rule didn't fire the second time, I should say, and consequently this rule didn't fire as a result. So that was a scratched trade. So we've got another couple of races to go before I have to finish for this evening, so I'll fast forward to those and let you see this in action. Okay, off and running at Wolverhampton in the 7 o'clock. The trouble with sprints, of course, and laying at 2, or indeed less than 2, is that those bets aren't likely to be matched until very late on in the race. So this particular technique may not be an ideal solution in such races, simply because this wait time here, this little 10-second window, may not be suitable given that everything's happening so quickly at the tail end of the race. But in terms of proof of concept, it's fine playing around with these sprints. So yeah, just let's hang around and we'll start to see bets taken. So the other potential, of course, is that when this thing kicks in twice, there is the potential for your green out position to actually be in the green, which might enable you to still make a profit. So that one's been fired. It looks like the market has moved on past it though. Yeah. So that's what I mean by what I'm trying to do here with all the action happening very late on in the race. It's not proving to be necessarily suitable for sprint races, but in terms of proof of concept, it works fine. Now keep in mind, I'm using lay the field simply to place bets into the market automatically. You can, of course, put in a bet manually, and as soon as that's matched, that can cause this rule to fire. So you might want to try this mechanism. This is the important thing here. As soon as you've got an open position in the market, this rule will fire. It will then count down till it fires again, assuming that the conditions are still the same, which will then cause that automated green out position. So by all means, have a little play with that. Those are the 2 rules that you need to think about specifically, but it can be used in any kind of market with any kind of strategy. Although certainly using a lay the field at such low odds isn't the best idea in a sprint. Okay, thank you very much.